Okay. You all ready? All right. If everybody could grab a seat, that would be great. My name is Phil Robertson, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Asia Division of Human Rights Watch. And I want to welcome you all to a press conference that actually we wish we'd never had to have. But we've had this now for 5 years running. This is a press conference on Sombath Somphone, 5 years on, demands for truth and justice continue. This is a initiative of the Sombath initiative. Well, okay. Initiative, the Sombath Initiative, Human Rights Watch. Can someone hold on a sec? Yeah, it's too loud. คุณรุ่งช่วยปรับหน่อยมันเสียงดังเกินไป Okay. Yeah, that's better. So this is an initiative of the Sombath Initiative, working with a number of human rights organizations and development organizations, Human Rights Watch, International Commission for Jurists, ASEAN Parliamentarian for Human Rights, International Federation for Human Rights, and focus on the Global South. Today we have several speakers, plus also Charles Santiago couldn't make it to the press conference, but he's going to join us online via Skype, so you'll hear from him as well. The situation, you know, when you have a press conference, you say, you know, the demands continue. You know that it is a difficult situation where there's been surprisingly little progress. And I'm going to ask first Shui Meng, who is the wife of Sombath Somphone, who is a career development practitioner with UNICEF, included being the deputy representative of Laos for UNICEF in 2000 to 2004. And she's going to start off and sort of explain where we are now and her hopes for what needs to happen next. So, Shui Meng.
Thank you, Phil, and good morning to everyone. Thank you for turning up today. You know, when we said we need to organize something, again, a press conference on Sombath Somphone, the fear that strikes me is who is going to turn up to listen again? There has been many, many press conferences held in this same venue over the past 5 years. But I am very thankful for our partners, our supporters within the human rights community, within the development community, and also within the diplomatic community, who continue to show their concern and the support on the issue of Sombath's disappearance. In the audience, I think there are a number of people from various embassies, from the Swedish embassy, from the Swiss embassy, from the Canadian embassy, and from the British embassy. And maybe there's some other people I don't recognize. Austrian embassy, yeah, that I may not recognize somewhere sitting behind. I really thank all of you for making the effort to come out, and also the journalists, the media people, and ordinary people turn up to this press conference. 15 December will mark the 5th year that Sombath has been disappeared. 5 years. 5 years he has been taken away from us. Before I recap some of the video capture that what happened 5 years ago, I just want to say, I want to also acknowledge and thank another person, a fellow victim, Angkanai Nilai Paichit. She sent me a very heartwarming message to express her solidarity. She couldn't come to this press conference. She has spoken with me on this same podium many, many times. She apologized that she cannot come to show her support because she's away. And she told me, she said, Shumeng, it will become harder and harder each year as the time goes on. In the case of Ankana, her husband, Somjai Nilepajit, has also been disappeared more than 10 years ago. She continues her struggle and in her search for truth and justice. I look to Ankana as a model. If Ankana hasn't given up, I have no right to give up, and I will never give up. So I really want to express my solidarity and gratitude to Ankana and also families of other victims of enforced disappearances. We are a very small community. We don't appear on headlines very much, and people forget us very easily. But we continue to be a community of fellow sufferers, fellow victims of enforced disappearances. So before, I'll go straight into what happened 5 years ago. Many of you might have seen this. Some of you, it may be your first time. So let me just show a few of the photographs captured from a CCTV footage of what happened to Sombath on the night of his disappearance on the 15th of December 2012. The first photo, it's not very sharp because it's been extended, shows Sombath's Jeep. Sombath is stopped. If you show you see the person there at the side of the Jeep is a police. He has stopped the Jeep that Sombath is in. Next. That's Sombath. He got out of the Jeep. The police is still there, all right? He got out of the Jeep, and next. He went into the police post just next. You can't see it in the dark, it's just here. It's a police post right on Tada Road, which is one of the main roads of Vientiane. And you see here the motorcycle. A motorcyclist then drove here and stopped right in front of the Jeep. Okay, next. And this is the motorcyclist who got out of the Jeep and went into the police post. Next. Next thing, the same motorcyclist who went to the police post came out and drove away Sombath's Jeep. I guess he went into the police post to get the keys of the Jeep and drove away Sombath's Jeep. Next. Then this is a policeman standing at the side of the road, waiting, next, for this white truck. The white truck came, the police is still there. They stopped right in front of the police. Next. Then shadows of Sombath was pushed into the Jeep. Next. The Jeep was then quickly driven away. If you see the entire sequence of the video footage, you will see that the Jeep was driven away so quickly even before the door was closed. And you can still see it on Sombath's website. You can download the entire sequence of this CCTV footage, which has been captured. In my mind, there's no doubt that Sombath has been taken by state agents and has been disappeared. 5 years. 5 years, I'm still haunted every day by images of what happened to him. I live with this. This is a living nightmare. People have asked me, why do you still campaign? Why do you still push to find Sombath? You should realize that people who have been disappeared in Laos never come back. There have been incidents and cases of people who have disappeared in the past. They never came back. So people are saying, why don't you go back to Singapore? Go home. Forget about this. He will never come back. To people who say this to me, and some are friends, there are some people who are even relatives, and say, go home. Go back to Singapore. Lead your life. Go back to find some form of normalcy. My answer is, how can you find normalcy? Someone who is such a part of yourself has been removed from you, and you don't know what happened. How can I stop? This is why I continue to say people like Ankana and the small community of family members of victims of enforced disappearance. We know all we need to do is to sit together and we understand how we feel. We understand what happened. I want to go into a little bit of what happened after we see what happened to Sombath. I appealed to the government. I reported his case to the police. Initially, the police say they're investigating. There were 2 press reports that came out saying that, yes, Sombath's jeep was stopped. It was acknowledged. But he was stopped by the police to inspect his vehicle documents. And the statement went on to say, after the police inspected his vehicle documents, he was sent away. And then the police denied that he has ever been captured. But when this series of footages were shown and released publicly, in the same statement, the police then say he might be kidnapped. Kidnapped for reasons of personal conflict or business conflict. Sombath never had any business interest. He spent his entire life working in community development, training young people, working in the area of sustainable development, education. He had never had any business contact or business interest. Whatever it may be, I kept saying, whatever it is still the role and the responsibility of the police to find him, catch whoever. If you say it's not the state, then somebody has clearly taken him. Go, find the perpetrators. Appeals have been written, letters have been written, no reply, no response. I have not been contacted by any of the police after the first initial few meetings, now for 4.5 years. Through the Singapore Embassy, I have still a request to meet with the police, and I have yet to meet the police. Why don't they meet the family? If someone has robbed a house, gone into the house, the police still has the role to go and find the thief. Why don't they want to meet me? I want to share something which I have actually reported to the UN Working Group for Enforced Disappearance, and also shared with the various diplomatic corps within Vientiane. Sombath was actually seen and was reported by eyewitness of someone who knew some police. And Sombath was physically seen in a holding center, which is not public, but it's like a house, which is identified as a police holding center. He was seen in there. His jeep was seen parked in the compound. When I reported this and told the police that's what he saw, and and when I reported this to the working group, the UN Working Group for Enforced Disappearances, the working group did ask and shared this information with the head of mission in Geneva. There was nothing but denial. No, it was false. Whoever gave this evidence is false. And the people who gave this piece of information to me did not want to testify. So there's no one dares to testify. No one dares to testify. So basically, the situation 5 years hence has remained the same. Many people continue to ask, especially from the development partners, from the various embassies, in various human rights dialogue. The issue of Sombath's disappearance continues to be asked, but what the answers they get back from government officials has been the same. We don't know what happened to Sombath. The investigation continues. The police has found nothing, but the police are still investigating. If the police are still investigating, why can't they share their reports with me? Why don't they share? What kind of investigation have they carried out? What did they find? Who did they talk to? What are the witnesses they interviewed? Why has there been silence? And why do they only talk to the diplomatic community when the officials ask? Why didn't they talk to me? The wife of the victim. Why do they avoid me? This has always been a question. So, as I say, actually there's nothing new development in the case. For me, it almost like the response is one of denial, 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 until people tire of the case, until maybe the family members tire of the case, and then the case will slowly, literally disappear, and Sombath will be forever disappeared. But I keep saying, I don't care how long it is. I will continue to ask, to struggle, and to campaign for the return of Sombath. I see this as a case of the need to have truth, the need to have justice. I can't not have truth. I cannot not have closure. I need to know what happened to him. Some people say, some Lao people say, oh, you don't ask anymore, Sombath is probably dead. I say, I don't care. Whether Sombath is dead or alive, I still need the truth. And truth is important. I think it is in every human being. You need the truth. That is why we live. We cannot live with a lie. We cannot live with this kind of denial. And I hope somewhere within the Lao establishment, somebody who knows will come forth. I'm now really beyond anger, because it's not anger anymore. I'm able to forgive, but I cannot forget. So what gives me the strength, the energy to go on? More and more I begin to look at and to recall and to reflect on the work Sombath has always done. I'm sure that if Sombath is still alive, wherever he is, he will continue to be an influence for good to the people around him, because that is what he is. He has spent all his life trying to work as an ordinary person. He has no political ties, he has no political ambition, he has no political aspirations to be more than what he is, an ordinary Lao person, son of a poor farmer, to work to improve the livelihoods of the people, like his parents, like the people who live in the community that he grew up with. He always say, that's all I want to do. I'm just a Lao, an ordinary Lao person. I have the opportunity to get some education, some experience, and I want to share, if possible, whatever positive experience and work with the people. So that's why he spent all his life working with the community on improvement of agriculture, on community development, on water sanitation, on improved education, improved health. And in the last 10 years before he was disappeared, he actually worked very, very closely on education, and especially education of the young people. Sombath believes there are many issues, many challenges in Laos. Many of these challenges need to be addressed and resolved by the Lao people themselves. Yes, development assistance, development aid can help ameliorate some of the challenges that the Lao people face. But at the end of the day, he say, we, the Lao people, need to find solutions for our own problems. And he says it's the young people who must be energized, who must use their creativity, their energies to change whatever they don't like in their own community or their own society, or how to improve the situation. And that's why he focused on the training of young people. And his vision is very simple. His vision is education, education in the big E, not school education, not schooling. Education in terms of opening people's mind, questioning, teaching them the skills to ask the right questions, to analyze, to see, and what can they do. Another thing is Sombath feels that education has to be linked to the Lao culture and the Lao environment. He always says more than 90% of the Lao people, now maybe less, are farmers. They depend on the land for a living. If we do not protect the land, ensure the land, the air, the water can sustain the livelihood of the people, if we destroy the very basis of our life, the environment, then he says, all the development progress, all the roads, all the buildings, all the money and the wealth, they will disappear. Lao people depend on the land. For their food, depends on the water. And this is why he always encouraged the young people, don't need to look far. Look at your own livelihoods. What sustains you? And at the later part of his life, he uses the Buddhist terminology of happiness and suffering. He said all Lao people, and when he talked about this, the Lao people really resonate because it is so deep in the Lao culture. Everybody aspires for happiness. So he challenges them, what makes you happy? Is it wealth? Is it material acquisition? What is it? And many of them come back to say, happiness starts with the self. Happiness means you have to be happy with yourself. You have to be able to say, I woke up, I live, and I do not harm people. I do not harm others, but also he say, don't think only of human beings. We are part of nature. We also do not harm nature. If we harm nature, we harm us. If we, in our life, in the way we go about our living, whether it is big development programs or small community projects or whatever, if we gain our well-being by destroying everything around us, life around us, we will lose that. So he drew very deeply into his Lao culture, into his Lao belief systems. But I also asked the question, what does Sombath do which is so threatening? I still don't have the answer. Maybe some people consider his ideas too radical or too anti-development. But Sombath has never been against development. He said development has to be balanced. Development must lead to the well-being of the people, people-centered. Progress has to be made without destroying whatever we have. And if we do have programs which cost, whether it is building a dam or building a new building or roads, factor in those externalities into the cost of the program. So getting a road is not just the cost of the road. Investing in banana plantations is not just producing bananas. What you get or gain from all these investments in terms of, and calculated in terms of GDP growth or whatever, you have to factor in also the cost, the externalities which don't get factored into many development programs. Maybe his ideas are too radical, but I really don't have an answer. So as I say, now, 5 years on, I reflect on the positive aspects, the way he lived his life, and I try to continue in my own little way what he has done, talking to the young people, challenging them. What is it that they want out of life? What is it that makes them happy, happy, truly worthy of looking at themselves and proud to be, I'm a human being. I'm a human being with compassion. I'm a human being that is kind. Whatever I do, I try not to harm other people as well as the environment around us. And be happy in that self. Be happy and be centered in your own aspiration as a human being. So I just want to stop here and leave it to whatever questions you may have later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Meng, for that very, very personal but also informative and helpful explanation of what's happening. Now we're going to turn to Charles Santiago. Charles, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. We've got Charles up on the screen over here. Charles Santiago is the chairman of the ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights. He's a member of parliament from Malaysia, a member of the DAP party, an opposition party, and he has led 2 different delegations of ASEAN parliamentarians to Vientiane to demand answers from the Lao government. And so let me turn it now over to Charles, who has been a consistent champion of this case and of the cause of human rights in the ASEAN region.
Thanks, Phil. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yep.
Is it a yes?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much. It's actually heart-wrenching to hear what Shui Meng was narrating earlier, because it brought back fond memories with Sombath organizing the Asia-Europe People's Forum in 2011, 2012, and going back to Laos, to Vientiane, as part of a delegation in 2013, which is 2 months after he disappeared, as well as in 2014, as part of a fact-finding mission to figure out what happened, what transpired in the disappearance of Sombath. Sombath is a dear friend. Let me put it outside. I mean, I knew him before he disappeared. We worked together to organize the Asia-Europe People's Forum in Vientiane, a very successful event. And therefore, having a friend disappearing is a personal, that you take something very personally in the course of work that you do. And listening to Shui Meng after 5 years, the chill that you go through is actually very real. I mean, this is really sad and heart-wrenching. It is sad because Laos hasn't changed since 2012. The country has got more undemocratic. The democratization doesn't seem to be working in Laos. There's no freedom of speech. Civil liberties are curtailed. There's hardly any government accountability, as clearly shown in the disappearance of Sombath, and lack of an independent media, and recently a further muzzling of the non-governmental organizations that are few and far between and in Laos, and a further suppression of their work. Now, this clearly shows that what you have is a dictatorship. You have a dictatorship in our midst, and increasingly more of the ASEAN countries are joining the dictatorship club. We have Cambodia in the same place, another dictator in the making. So you really have a problem, and the question is, what do you do? I think it's a failure on the part of ASEAN. ASEAN had celebrated its 50 years of its existence, and there is no word, there's no discussion in any of the official forums on the state of democracy in the region, especially in Laos. I think every state leader who was at the meeting in Manila is familiar with the Sombath's case. The NGOs have raised the issue over and over again. In the last 5 years, there's been a major clamoring for some kind of accountability in the disappearance of Sombath, but there's no discussion at all. So really, the state of ASEAN and the democracy practice in ASEAN, the free speech in ASEAN, is something that you see also in Laos and vice versa. And in this way, our dictators get away with murder. It actually shows that the state can do anything with impunity, and there'll be no accountability, and there'll be no recourse from the state. And we have to fight every nook and corner, we have to struggle every nook and corner in order to find truth and justice, the issues that Shui Meng had raised. Now, I think Shui Meng had asked a very pertinent question, and this: why was he? Why did he become? Was he a threat to Laos? Was he a threat to the establishment in Laos, the political establishment, the political elite in Laos? Now, having been to Laos many times, and as part of the two fact-finding mission to Laos, 2013 and 2014, it strikes me that indeed that Sombath was putting forward a different narrative, though. He was putting forward a people's narrative. He was putting forward an alternative narrative, a narrative of hope, a narrative of empowerment, a narrative of sustainability, and in generally telling the Laotian young people, especially challenging the young people, that it is their country, it is their land, and they need to take control of that land and the environment in which they work and they stay. Now, I think this is the reason why the elite in Laos were threatened, and they felt that he had to go. And I see no other reason. In fact, as you might know, that the establishment is divided into two. One, you have the administrators are very friendly to you, but the leadership of the party is another. It appears to me that there is a subgroup within the government itself that seems to be orchestrating what needs to happen, and the political elites just mouth or just give voice to the issues that are raised at the inner meetings of the political party or the Communist Party of Laos. So clearly, you will never have accountability in this kind of situation. And I think the victim of that process is actually Sombath. So Sombath was an ASEAN leader. He was perceived as a leader of the non-governmental organizations. He was seen as a leader who actually brought forward the hope of young people. He's the one who cultivated the hope of young people. Now, what you see is that hope has no place in Laos. New thinking has no place in Laos. And therefore, you really have to think about the quality of democracy, the quality of human rights, and the space that's available for civil society to operate and to articulate its positions. What did Sombath do that was so harmful? He said, take care of the land, take care of the water, it's yours. If you mess with it, if you pollute it, you're going to pay the price. Now, what is so wrong with that? But unfortunately, those kinds of issues are not something that is seen as helpful to the elite of Laos, and therefore he paid a heavy price. Now, it's also clear to me, re-looking for maybe the 100th time the video that was shown earlier, that this is definitely a state-sanctioned enforced disappearance. One cannot run away from that. It is so clear the state is involved. And having spoken to the highest levels of people in government, I can tell you in all strength that that this is state sanctioned. It's definitely state sanctioned. The people we met in 2013 and 2014 were people who knew Sombath very well. They went to the same schools. They were part of the same village. They went for the same programs. They ate in this. One guy told me, one senior minister told me, he even ate in the same plate as Sombath did. So if we ate in the same plate as Sombath, with Sombath, so why did Sombath go disappearing? And who's responsible for that? So it really raises a lot of questions. But unfortunately, we in ASEAN have lost a towering NGO personality, a towering ASEAN person, if you want. And this is a major loss to us, a major loss to the people of Laos. And I think there is a need for accountability, really a lot of accountability. And I think this is a challenge that we have in the region. I will stop here and maybe take up questions if you have a bit later.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you for your thoughts and also for your perspective. And Charles is going to, I think, stay on the line so that we can ask questions for him at the end of the program. Now I'm going to turn to Anne-Sophie Guindos, who is the former country director of Helvitas, and who was actually expelled from the country literally a week before Sombath was disappeared. She's now written a novel about that experience called Laos, the Silent Repression. So please share your thoughts with us.
Okay. Well, thank you for inviting me, and thank you to everyone to be here with us today. So at the time I was working with a Swiss organization called Helvetas. I was actually the country director. But to make it clear, I'm not working anymore for Helvetas, and I'm not here on behalf of Helvetas. I'm not representing any organization in this forum. But I want to bring a little bit of perspective about what it means to be working in Laos as an international organization and to be part of this international community when you are engaging in a country like Laos. It has been very challenging. And it has been very challenging not only because of all this restrictive environment that is prevailing in Laos, but it has been challenging also because of all these difficulties faced when you want to mobilize support and solidarity for issues like human rights in Laos. And I think that as an international organization, as a donor, as an aid agency, when you are engaging in a country where you have a democratic deficit, where you are engaging in a country ruled by an authoritarian regime, I really believe that you bear a specific responsibility on how you work, how you engage, how you operate in such a context. And I really believe that you have to be very cautious. You have to really understand first the context in which you are working, because it's so easy to underestimate what's happening, especially in a country like Laos. Not only when you are visiting, this country, even for those who are working inside Laos, it's very easy not to see all this dark side of the country. Nobody will come up to you and tell you about this. Nobody will speak about human rights abuses, about land grabs, about restriction put on local association. So it's very easy actually to underestimate, and this is what is making it so hard to actually mobilize more engagement around all these issues. And this is one of the reasons why I decided after Sombath was abducted that I would write this book. The book is entitled Laos, the Silent Repression. Maybe I just have to explain to you that I had the privilege to cooperate with Sombath when I was working in Laos. I was also part of the organizing committee for the Asia-Europe People Forum, which happened in October 2011, and who was 2009. No, 2011. Yeah. 2011, and the forum was co-chaired by Sombath, right? And it was just a big event that happened before. Well, I was expelled, and 1 week later, Sombath was abducted. So I decided to write this. It's a testimony, actually, and it's a testimony that I wanted to share, to tell actually what were the events which led to this abduction, what was happening before, and also I wanted to make the people understand how repression is operating in a country like Laos. You don't have images of repression like you have from other countries, and it's repression through fear. And I wanted actually to share the little bit of what I've seen, I've heard, I've experienced during my 3.5 years in Laos. And just about the title of the book, why is it entitled The Silent Repression? Actually, there are two reasons. The first reason is because it's a repression through fear. It's a repression by imposing silence on any dissent voice. But the other reason, it's also a silent repression because it's a repression we are not talking about. And if you want to fight fear, the first step is to talk, is to speak out, is to share the information. So this is why I decided to explain about this. And also, my hope is that this book will also steer some reflection among international cooperation partners, among organizations, aid agencies, donors who are also working in Laos, because I think that much more can be done. You know, we all are committed to human rights. You always have references to human rights values, principles in preamble of any agreement signed with any government, right? But how to turn this into reality? I think we really have a responsibility, and again, much more can be done. Of course, there are development cooperation projects, there are programs, there are even human rights dialogue. But I really believe that more can be done to use this aid, this assistance, as a leverage to promote positive changes, to be able to better target who you are working with in a country like Laos, to support the more progressive forces. How you can do more in creating an enabling environment, like Meng said. It's important that the Lao people are able to decide for themselves, that the Lao civil society is empowered, is associated to all this big development machine which is operating in Laos. But they can't do it if there is not an enabling environment. And as international actors working inside Laos, we have a specific responsibility to be able that, you know, we create more space for local actors to be there, to be at the table when we are discussing about development agenda, to have access to information, to be prepared to contribute. And also, very important, when there are abuses being committed, when you have someone like Sombath being abducted, then you don't keep silent. You raise it. You speak about it. You ask questions, and you are not just satisfied with any answer. And I think it's so important to link it with what you are doing in the country. Again, to use this aid, these dialogues, these spaces as a leverage. So, yeah, I think there is a very fine line between cooperation and complicity. And again, it's a very tricky environment, a country like Laos, to engage. But I think there is really space to do more, to do better. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for those comments and for that perspective. We actually invited almost a dozen different representatives to come from Laos. Bilateral development agencies, multilateral development agencies, large international NGOs, various different groups that are doing projects with civil society in Laos. And we were hoping that they were going to sit right here. But none of them were prepared to speak publicly about their experience dealing with civil society development and human rights issues in Laos. Despite our best efforts to try to get someone here to speak about this issue, to speak about Sombath Somphone and what his contributions to development have meant in Laos, no one was willing to sit in this chair. So it gives you an idea a little bit about the concern about projects, about continuing to have access, I guess maybe in some cases fear that they might get expelled, like Anne-Sophie did. But it's a telling indication of the failure of development agencies to stand up for some of the principles that they put on their websites. And the situation has actually gotten a little bit worse since then, actually. We just found out in, say, the last month or so that there's been a new decree, number 238, that has been passed by the Lao government regulating what are called NPAs, nonprofit associations. These are the associations like PADEC, which is composed of Lao nationals coming together voluntarily to do development work. And this decree, which replaces a previous decree from 2009, is actually worse than that previous decree. People forget that Laos has ratified the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which sets out international standards on freedom of association, peaceful public assembly, and other core civil and political rights. This decree that is now in force as of the 15th of November quite clearly violates those obligations under the International Civil and Political Rights Convention. And I'll just go through a couple points to give you an idea of how draconian this new decree is and how it really does extend state control very clearly into the nonprofit civil society sector in Laos. There's a whole set of areas under this decree where the NPA would have to have a prior approval. So for instance, in order to receive fund or donations, you have to get approval for those funds and donations to be given. You have to have permission to interact or cooperate with an international organization or foreign entities. And you're obligated to operate in accordance with the party's policies. That's a specific quote there. Various restrictions on activities of associations. Purposes don't include, of course, human rights work, but also doesn't apparently involve any other sort of something that could be determined to be political. And like many of these areas in this decree, the terms that are being used are not defined. They're basically left to the discretion of the implementers within the government and the party. There's a number of specific things that are outlawed. It's quote, operating, quote, in conflict with the government regulations, unquote, engaging in activities that, quote, threaten social order and fine national, local, and ethnic traditions, unquote, or, quote, divide national or local solidarity, unquote, and acting to, quote, destroy national interests, unquote, and also engaging with, quote, foreign experts and volunteers to have permanent work in the association, unquote. So a number of very, very broad areas where the government can determine that something a national nonprofit association is doing falls in one of those categories and prevent them from operating. There's also a number of provisions for key government ministries to continue to monitor and surveil the processes of these national profit associations. And it is illegal for a national profit association to operate, quote, in serious violation of party guidance and policy, and also that it is illegal for an organization to operate if you do not apply for registration. So everybody must comply with these regulations. What Laos has done is further put civil society in a straitjacket under the control of the Lao government, basically preferring government control or party control over aspects of participatory development. And that's very, very concerning. So we're going to, there's a group of international NGOs who are led by the International Commission for Jurists who've done an analysis of this. We're going to be sending a letter next week to the government of Laos raising our concerns about this new decree and how it's going to be implemented in Laos. So with that, now the floor is open for questions. Since this is a press conference, I would like to request that working members of the press be given preference. If you'd like to ask a question, please go to the microphone in the back, identify yourself, identify the news agency that you represent, and let me know who you're directing the question to so that we can get a clear answer. After the press have done their questions, then of course we'll open the floor to everyone.
Arnaud Dubus with Radio France. 5 years after Sombath's disappearance, what is the kind of atmosphere among the civil societies, the local civil societies in Laos, given also this new decree?
Who is directing the question?
Yeah, I address the question to
Whoever.
anyone.
The question is about, the feelings or the atmosphere of amongst the local NGOs or organizations in Laos.
I think clearly, after what happened to first Sophie was kicked out, and then Sombath was abducted, immediately it sends a chill to the entire Lao population. I would say population, because everybody started to say, what happened? Sombath has never been threatening, has never championed any political protest, never started anything that actually can be interpreted as opposing the government. To the Lao people, the signs or the signals are very clear. If somebody like Sombath could be disappeared, anybody could be disappeared. Young, old, male, female, and immediately there was silence. I can give you examples directly. People who knew me, and I knew many people who work in government and also non-government agencies and ordinary people. People, especially within government, avoided me. When I go up to them and ask them, can you tell me anything? Do you have any information about Laos, about Sombath? The first thing is say, I know nothing, don't ask me, I don't know anything. And then they walk away. And if they see me approaching them, they walk the other way around. It was very clear they don't want to see me. They don't want to have to answer my questions. And among the very small civil society groups, the fear was even greater. We don't know whether we can continue to work. We don't know which area of work. And everyone became very quiet. Some people who worked with civil society organizations actually left. There were a number of people who used to work in Padak, which is Sombath's organization, left. Now, time has passed, 5 years down the line. The fear is still there. The fear is there by not so much that actually I don't think it's not clear whether the government will do anything or the officials will do anything. But this fear is now expressed in the form of self-censorship. The CSOs who continue to work now work in what is, or in their interpretation and in their own assessment, as safe areas. Safe areas meaning you can continue to work in education, means you can build schools, you can dig wells, you can construct water and sanitation facilities in the community, you can hold meetings, but don't raise questions about sensitive issues. Sensitive issues can cover things like corruption, land grabbing. There is actually an organization actually led by INGOs called the Land Issue Working Group, which has been quite active in the past. Now, the Land Issue Working Group has been asked by the government to change its name to Land Information Working Group. Because if you raise the issue, if you call it a land issue, that means there are some problems. So, even the term issue has to be changed by this group. And people self-censor because they know if they need to work, whether they work for an NGO or work in their own civil society organization, they have to have every project signed. When they travel to the field, they have to get approval or have someone from government to travel with them. And everybody prefers not to speak up. And that continues today.
Can I
Hi,
add
Phil.
something?
Phil?
Phil? Can
Yes,
I just
please,
add something?
please.
Philip, can I say something?
Yes, please. Why don't we, Anne-Sophie first, and then we'll, Anne-Sophie first, and then we'll turn to Charles to also say a few things.
Yeah, I just want to add something regarding the climate of fear. Actually, at the time of my expulsion, I was also the chair of the land issue working group Meng was referring to. I was very optimistic. I was really optimistic that something, was engaging. There was a kind of dynamic, and my expulsion won't change anything to that. I mean, it was just a small accident, but there were so many committed people and so many interesting things happening at the time. But then when Sombath was abducted, really everything fell apart. And even at the level of the land issue working group, any engagement at the level of the community stopped. They could work on calendars, on, promoting materials, but not anymore doing field activities. And as Meng said it, the fact that Sombath was targeted sent a very strong message. If this can happen to Sombath, it can happen to everyone. And why this case is so important until today, it's because it's continuing to feeding the fear. Because the message now is, if nothing can be done for Sombath, nothing can be done for the others. Sombath is not the only one who have disappeared in Laos. So this is my just small comment.
Charles, can you add something as well?
Thanks, Phil. Already in 2013, when we went for the first fact-finding mission, as well as the follow-up in 2014, it was almost impossible to speak to the local NGOs. And these were friends of ours when we were organizing the conference, the Asia-Europe People's Forum in 2012. And we used to meet them almost on a monthly basis as part of the preparatory process. But once Sombath disappeared, they refused to answer our phones, no emails, even on a face-to-face meeting was almost impossible. So it was actually a warning to all NGOs to watch out, that they're being watched, and any attempt to talk to anybody about Sombath or to clarify on issues of Sombath will not go down well with the government. Also, I think very pointedly, the question that was raised by Radio France, what is the impact of the new laws that are coming into being? I think it is going to further curtail and further choke, if I can use that expression, further choke whatever small space or limited space that can possibly exist in Laos at this time. And this will actually make any democratic possibilities or opening of the space impossible. But I must say, Phil, that there is one country that can do something about this, and that is China. China has a swaying power over Laos, just like it has a swaying power over a lot of other ASEAN countries. It is clear that ASEAN has failed in its responsibilities to discipline its member country, especially in relation to state-sanctioned disappearance. But I think China, being the new hegemonic power in the region and a close ally of Laos, can do something about this though. So, but this is a difficulty because China has clearly come out as an ally of the ruthless dictators that we have in the region, and therefore it's going to be quite an impossible task. But I think it is time in ASEAN for us to start making China and its foreign policy, especially involving human rights and democracy in the region, accountable. It cannot get away by supporting dictators in the region and keeping quiet and supporting them financially, economically, and otherwise. So I think it's time we start putting pressure on China. And I think given that Sombath's experience is a good case, of we begin to point the finger at China and asking China to own up to its regional responsibilities or global human rights responsibilities. I think this would be a call in commemorating the Human Rights Day that falls 3 days from now on December 10th, to make China responsible for its human rights record in Southeast Asia. Thanks, Phil.
Thank you, Charles. the floor is open. Other question?
Good morning. Andrea Giorgetta, Asia Desk Director for FIDH, International Federation for Human Rights. I have two questions for Anne-Sophie Gindreau. First of all, just let me do a little bit of promotion of the book. This is the book that was printed in French, The Silent Repression, and a copy is also available online, translated into English. This book is excellent, and in fact, if you go back 5 years ago, within a span of 2 months, a lot of things happened that in the lead up to the disappearance of Sombath Somphone. So first question is that, for those who are not familiar to all those events that happened before the disappearance of Sombath, could you please detail some of those events? And the second question is, when you say that much more can be done by development partners to promote the human rights agenda in Laos, what can be done? Do you have any practical examples? Because what happened to you is significant, of a person who spoke up and got kicked out of the country. Thank you.
So I'm not going to describe all the event which led to during the APF and what happened until my expulsion and somebody's disappearance. I mean, everything is available if you want to read about it. But just to answer your question, you know, it was the first time that the People Forum was organized in Laos, and the reason this People Forum was organized. And I strongly believe that this was a kind of turning point also in what happened next. The reason was that Laos wanted to host the Asia-Europe meeting, the ASEM. They wanted to gain more visibility on the international scene, and they were kind of obliged to also allow a people forum before that. This is a tradition, right? You have, before the head of government and head of states meet, you have civil society meeting. And we were, many of us were quite doubtful. Is it possible to organize the people forum in Laos? Is it really going to happen? And Sombath was actually very positive about it. He was saying that it was a very good opportunity to actually bring the Lao government closer to the Lao civil society, to build trust, to build engagement and open dialogues. And Sombath became the chair of this People Forum, but during the preparation, he also organized, with the authorization of the government, of course, but he organized the first ever big consultation process in all the provinces of the country, because he wanted to have a valuable contribution from the Lao people into this forum. It was something unprecedented. And it was not about talking, you know, about development policies or, you know, budget allocation. No, it was about what makes you happy and what makes you unhappy. So it was a very human approach, right, to all these issues. And actually, during this consultation, what came out was very interesting. It covered all these development issues, but through different ways. And the aspiration of the Lao people were very clear and was actually giving a very good indication about what was expected from the government, but also from the international community in terms of what kind of future the people wanted, what do they see as main problems, what needs to be addressed. But of course, this was something that didn't please everybody. And during the Asia People Forum, actually all the preparation process was a constant negotiation, and we were mainly dealing with people from the foreign affairs. But you know, nothing was ever forbidden. So we had to negotiate, but we had the feeling that we could make progress. And there were not any, you know, censorship on what could be discussed or not, who could be invited or not. But during the forum, many things happened. Many incidents happened. There were intimidation, there were threats, there were people being forbidden to speak. You know, Sombath made a speech, but pages in his speech who were supposed to be distributed suddenly disappeared. We were not allowed to distribute the film that was made out of this consultation process. We had to take out the CD copies from the bags of the participants. So many incidents. And after the forum, just after, Sombath felt that, because he was the chair of this forum, because he was involved in the organizing of this forum, he had a responsibility to actually address these issues. And we did it, both of us. We tried, to address these issues, especially because threats were continuing after the forum. And, people from the government reacted in a very strong way. I think we underestimated how the public security, how the more conservative element of this regime would use actually the People Forum to identify people, to monitor people, and then also to try to restrict these people and this organization. So this is a little bit about the link with the Asia-Europe People Forum, which again I believe was a kind of turning point, because imagine in the capital of Vientiane, suddenly during 3 days, you have activists, you have very militant organizations gathering from the region, gathering from Europe, and talking about issues that are not being debated in Laos, not openly, about land grabbing, about restriction to civil society, this kind of thing, which is all part of the development agenda. And I think it was like an alarm for the more, again, the more conservative people in the regime. And they wanted to send a signal that, Laos is opening economically, not on the political side. And I think this is what led to the event after the forum. Now, what can be done by development organization? I'm not pretending that I have the answers to all these questions, really not. But I strongly believe, and this is also based on my experience working in Laos as a representative of an international organization, I really believe that we can do more. We can do more to understand what is really happening. I've been expelled basically because I wrote a letter to development agencies and to diplomatic representatives telling them that they should not underestimate what's happening. And they should not underestimate how this restriction on basic freedoms is actually affecting the way that we can work, is affecting the quality of our work in Laos. So do not underestimate what's happening. Try to understand, really. Talk to the right people. It's not enough just to have this internal briefing or talk to government people. It's not enough. Or to other international representatives there. You really need to, this is your responsibility, you really need to understand what's happening. Second thing, don't work only with the government. Diversify your program. There is a big push for doing budget aid. Budget aid is fine, especially if you have a democratic government, but don't do only budget aid. Don't give all your resources to the government. You have to work with civil society. You have to support, you have to empower also local civil society. Then the third thing, use your aid, use your political dialogue, use your human rights dialogue to really address the real issues. And when there are abuses being committed, when people like Sombath has been a partner to all these donors. Everyone who wanted to know something about civil society in Laos talked to Sombath. Everyone who wanted to build any engagement with NPA talked to Sombath. He was known to everyone. He was a partner to many. When he disappeared, don't keep quiet. You have to fight. And don't be satisfied with this kind of answers that an investigation is still ongoing. It's not enough. And you use your aid as a leverage, really. You do it. You don't disconnect your European or not only the European, but your human rights dialogue. You don't disconnect it from your other support, including budget aid. Thank you.
I would just add also that to date, Laos is still the only country now that, as ASEAN chair, did not have an ASEAN People's Forum. There was an ASEAN People's Forum that was scheduled 2 years ago in Laos, and the group of so-called NGOs that were assembled by the government refused to actually have that People's Forum take place. So it was actually ended up being moved to East Timor.
Yeah, just about this. Actually, they don't refuse. But there was a clear message being shared at the time that this People Forum can take place in Laos, but there are 5 issues that should not be talked about. And these 5 issues were, first, the multi-partism democracy. Second, everything is in relation to hydropower dam. Third one, about LGBT. Fourth one, about indigenous people. And fifth one, about Sombath.
Yeah, in that case, there was an ongoing negotiation, as I recall, between the ASEAN People's Forum and the Lao Authorities on those issues. And ultimately, the Lao government said, well, the key people within the NGO group from the Lao government basically said, doesn't look like we can hold it here. It's not enough time. It's inconvenient. Please go somewhere else. And to date, that is the only government that has done that to the ASEAN People's Forum since the ASEAN People's Forum was founded more than 10 years ago. Other questions, please?
Sawasdee วันนี้ข้าพเจ้าอยากถามแม่ปาอันซุเมงว่าขออนุญาตงอภาษาลาวเนาะเพราะว่าข้าพเจ้าภาษาอังกฤษบ่ค่อยแข็งแรงมื้อนี้เพราะว่าพวกเฮามากันหลายคนเนาะคนลาวมื้อนี้อยากถามว่าแม่ปารู้สึกจังได๋ว่าคนลาวเฮามีหลายที่ว่าเป็นกำลังใจให้แม่ปาและก็ท่านหลายๆคนที่หายสับสนแล้วก็คำถามที่2ก็คืออยากถามมาบาปาซาเรตเนาะมิสเตอร์ซาเรต from Malaysia คำถามที่1อยากถามแม่ปาซุเมงว่าแม่ปารู้สึกได้ใดตัวคนลาวหลายคนเนาะที่จะให้กำลังใจแม่ป้าในเวลานี้ที่รู้สึกว่าสูญเสีย But the second might
He wanted me to translate his question. The first question, because he is more comfortable to speak in Lao, and his first question is to Shui Meng, and asking Shui Meng how she feels about the way the Lao people who are here and other place can express their support and their feelings for Shui Meng and the family. And the second question is to Charles.
Sorry, that I would like to speak up. Malaysia language. Bapak Saleta, selamat siang. Saya mau berbicara tanya Bapak tentang human rights, ASEAN human rights, because ASEAN human rights tidak berbicara tentang human rights in Laos, tidak serius berbicara tentang human rights in Laos itu. Saya tak pernah tidak mendengar tentang ASEAN itu. Dan ASEAN tak pernah berbicara serius human rights in Laos. Terima kasih banyak. Bapak tolong berbicara bahasa Inggris saja. Terima kasih banyak.
Hi, Phil.
Yeah.
Hello.
You translate that or not? Huh? Okay.
I can translate.
Yes.
I can translate.
Okay. Anne-Sophie, please.
Yeah, I can translate. So the question was about, it was directed to Charles, and actually the question is about the role of AICHR at the ASEAN level to really engage on human rights issue and why not more is being done on human rights issues, but especially about Laos, why the situation in Laos is not better addressed at the ASEAN level.
Did you get that? Did you get that, Charles?
Yeah, I got it. Thanks.
Sorry, that's the question.
All right, now who's going first?
Charles, you can go first.
คือข้าพเจ้าเห็นปึ้มหัวนี้เนาะที่มาดามโซฟีเขียนเนาะก็คือเขียนนี่ข้าพเจ้าเห็นดีที่สุดเนาะ I'm agree with her นะเพราะว่าเป็นเรื่องจริงเป็นความจริงทุกประการที่กล้าที่จะยืนขึ้นมาเขียนความจริงที่บ่มีไผเคยเขียนบ่มีไผที่จะสะท้อนหรือเห็นสังคมลาวที่แท้จริงคือ UN ก็บอกกล้าเว้าความจริงในสังคมลาวทั้งที่เห็นปัญหาองค์กรต่างๆบ่เคยเขียนบ่เคยเว้าบ่เคยปรึกษาหารือกับรัฐบาลลาวเกี่ยวกับ Human Rights แม้กระทั่งท่านสมบัติสมพรสูญหายไปเป็นส่วนหนึ่งของเกี่ยวกับการละเมิดสิทธิมนุษย์เนาะและหลายๆคน
We should try to also get a question too, please.
He just yes, I will. He just said that regarding the book, he agrees with what you have written. I don't know if he's read the book, but he agrees with what you've written because the issue of human rights and things that have happened in Laos, no other organization or person have had the courage to write it, not even the UN, which has been there for a long time, and there are so many donors, and nobody has written about these situations that you have explained so clearly.
มีคำถามอยู่ว่าคือมาดามโซฟีเนาะคือมีความท้าทายคือขอบใจที่กล้าเขียนขึ้นมาคืออยากถามเกี่ยวกับองค์กรระหว่างประเทศเนาะองค์กรต่างๆนานาหรือว่า NGO ที่เฮ็ดเวียกอยู่ลาวเป็นอย่างบ่กล้าเว้าความจริงทุกอย่างเกี่ยวกับ Human Rights ในลาวเนาะแล้วก็ตลอดการสูญหายบ่แม่นเท่าท่านสมบัติสมพรคนเดียวที่หายสาบสูญไปในเวลานี้ขอบใจ
So the question is that Aunt Sophie has had the courage to write this, and why is it that no other organization or person working in Laos or in Laos has had the courage to write this working on the issue of human rights? It's a huge challenge. And so maybe the panel can address why nobody else is writing about these very important issues that Aunt Sophie wrote about.
Charles,
you want to speak first, or?
Yeah, let me go first. Let me answer the question that he had raised about ASEAN. I think it is fair to say that democracy, human rights, rule of law are not priorities of ASEAN or the heads of government in ASEAN. So given that it is not a priority, it is not reflected in the work program or in the practice of ASEAN or its partner countries. In fact, you have all these nice, wonderful sounding themes, a caring ASEAN, a sharing ASEAN, ASEAN for all, but clearly it is not an ASEAN for all or a sharing or a caring ASEAN. It is a business ASEAN, it is an elite ASEAN, where issues of rule of law, democracy, human rights do not take center stage, do not take priority. It is definitely written all over the place. You find it in all the declarations and the various agreements that is being made. But in terms of practice, it is not reflected at all. Secondly, ASEAN is governed by something called an arcane principle called non-interference, which means that states do not get involved in the internal affairs of another state. So therefore, that actually is used to stop one country criticizing or raising issues of another country, whether it's a rule of law, violation of human rights, or democracy. Only recently, in the last 1 year, 1 or 2 countries have broken that principle, especially in relation to the ethnic cleansing in Myanmar involving the Rohingyas. But it's only as far as Rohingyas are concerned, and the countries that actually have responded to it are doing it not because they actually believe in it, I think, but it's largely opportunistic reason responding to the domestic issues that they are facing and trying to appease a domestic crowd. But I think people all over the region, NGOs, trade unions, civil society organizations, have to put pressure on our governments in order to break the non-interference principle, go bypass it, and be very bold about an ASEAN that is committed to human rights, democracy, rule of law, good governance, and so on and so forth. Because the governments are more concerned about an economic arrangement, an economic community, but not at all about the way human rights, democracy, rule of law, and good governance is conducted. On the other question that he had raised in specific to Anne-Sophie, about Anne-Sophie's book, I think it'll be fair to say that Anne-Sophie's book is very welcome. It puts the thing in perspective, the whole experience in perspective, but also it must be acknowledged that other non-governmental organizations outside of Laos, and some 1 or 2 within Laos, who have actually championed on this particular issue. We have groups in the region, we have groups in Europe that have actually raised the issue in a variety of forums involving the Laotian government, ASEAN, the European Parliament, European communities, and even the United States, and so on and so forth. So I think we have to be, we have to acknowledge that a whole lot of people in Asia, Europe, and in America have been involved in trying to keep the Sombath state-sanctioned disappearance alive. I think that we should have that larger perspective. But I think I want to come back to a point that I raised earlier, that we have a new hegemon in Southeast Asia, in ASEAN, and that is China. We really need to have a strategy in trying to address this question in China on the question of rule of law, human rights, and democracy. I think this is the challenge going forward, and I think that is a lesson, one of the big lessons that comes out of the Sombath experience in the last 5 years.
Thank you for the question. The question is asking about my feelings and reaction about what the Lao people can do. I think there is silent support among many Lao people. People who are may not be directly linked to the perpetrators, even in governments, people who, even though they don't approach me directly, I think there's a feeling that everybody think an injustice has been done. But they don't know how to address the issue, how to express the solidarity. There are Lao people who live outside who have extended their support and solidarity. But at the end of the day, it's Lao people who have to make the decision what kind of a society they want to live in, what kind of issues they want to raise. I think there will still be opportunities to raise issues and to discuss this openly. Although we don't know, as Anne-Sophie pointed out, the Lao officialdom never says no, never says this is off the agenda or this should not be raised. So the Lao people understands this and need to walk a tightrope. And sometimes you need to push the margin. What I find among the Lao people, the Lao, whether they are civil society groups or ordinary people or people in government, they tend to self-censor because they don't know where the line is. So even if the line is here, their personal line is way behind the official line. I don't blame them because they don't know. They don't know how to test the waters. A few people have tested the waters and have suffered severe consequences. 3 young people, Lao people, who expressed their dissatisfaction about various issues of corruption, governance in Laos. They were working in Thailand. When they returned to Laos to renew their passport, they were taken, disappeared for a few months until then they were resurfaced, confessing on television that they have done wrong. They should never have, insulted the Lao government. They have been misled, and their cases, the cases were brought to court. One person is now in prison for 22 years, one for 18, and one for 14, for crimes of using the internet to defame the government. So, the signals are still very clear, sent out to the Lao people, be careful. And I don't know what the Lao people can do in many cases for people who have disappeared or people who suffer the consequences of challenging the authorities. Be careful. I will not want to see another case of disappearance happen to any family in Laos. Find ways you work in the local community. Find ways to, express the way you work. But never give up. Never say, okay, I cannot do anything, therefore I do nothing. I think that will be complete defeat. Thank you.
Last question. This is the last question. Any last question? If not, okay. Well, let me thank our panelists here. Also thank Charles for calling in from Malaysia, and say that I hope that we don't have to do this next year, that I hope we don't enter into another cycle of 5 years trying to find out what happened to Sombath Somphone. It's quite clear that the answers are with the Lao government. The Lao government has to come forward, allow for a real investigation, and hold accountable the people who are responsible for this enforced disappearance. Nothing else is acceptable, and speaking on behalf of the various organizations that are sponsoring this conference along with the Sombath Initiative, we will stand with Shui Meng and with Sombath for as long as it takes until we discover the truth.
May I have? I want to also really thank Phil and all the organizers who are part of the Sombath Initiative to continue to raise the issue and organize activities of this kind. And Charles is right. I also want to express my thanks to the various organizations and the various embassies who continue to raise the issue. We have to acknowledge that they continue to raise the issue, including the Singapore government. I believe that I'm able to live in Laos is because the officialdom knows that people are looking after my welfare, so to speak. And your expression of solidarity, your continued queries and questions about what happened to Sombath, in fact, lends me some degree of protection. So please continue. And I want to, once more, thank you all. Tonight, I think, okay, no,
Yeah.
Phil
I'm going to announce it. Tonight there's going to be here at the FCCT, starting at, I believe, 6:30, a film about Sombath Somphone. and his life. You are all welcome to come and watch the film. Please tell your friends to come. Some of the people who may not have been able to come today for the press conference or may be working after work, please have them come here to the club, have dinner, and watch the film. And then there'll be another discussion after the film as well.
It's free.
And it's free.
Free and entry is free.
Huh?
Entry is free.
The entry is free, says the key organizer behind the scenes. So thank you very much for coming. Come tonight for the film. And again, thank you for your interest and support for Sombath Somphone. I'm Phil.
I'm sorry, I'm Pierre from the Embassy of Switzerland.
Ah, nice to see you.
Yeah, we briefly met the Belgian ambassador for breakfast.
That's correct, that's correct.
Thanks a lot for the event. Huh?
Sure, sure. Yeah. Hey, good to see you. Glad you could make it.
Yeah.
Well, you actually saw a significant amount of it then.
Merci beaucoup pour ça. Je vois encore mon collègue, ma collègue Alessandra qui va aussi voir. Et puis, bon pour la suite, merci. Si jamais vous ne vous avant pas que vous avez le temps de dire quelque chose, c'est gentil. Merci.
What must have been at Sombath?
Thank you so much for all what you said today. Very strong statement. Best regards from my ambassadors. I think I met him also earlier this year from his team.
Right, yes, I did. Thank you. Thank you for continuing.
My colleague would come tonight as well for screening of the movie, so he will be there.
Thank you.
The best to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Ben, alaya, ben.